The London sun still struggled to pierce through the thick layer of smog when the black Mercedes-Benz turned onto Oxford Street. Inside the vehicle, Raphael Stone adjusted the knot of his Italian tie while mentally reviewing the presentation he was due to give in less than an hour. At 38, he had built a real estate empire that commanded figures capable of making any competitor tremble. Commercial buildings, luxury condominiums, shopping centers. Everything bore his signature. Everything was synonymous with quality and exclusivity. His chauffeur, Arthur, a middle-aged man with a perpetually serious expression, skillfully swerved to avoid a bus. That cut them off. Raphael barely noticed. His mind was split between the morning's multi-million-pound contracts and the final preparations for the wedding that would take place in exactly 2 weeks. Catherine Maxwell would be his wife. Just thinking her name brought a discreet smile to his lips. Daughter of a traditional London family, educated in international relations in Europe, fluent in 4 languages, with a smile that brightened any room. She was the perfect woman to be by his side, the missing piece in the puzzle of his impeccable life. Traffic began to snarl up around Regent Street. Raphael sighed. Even leaving an hour early, London always found a way to defy any planning. He picked up his cell phone to check emails when an abrupt movement caught his attention. A child was approaching the car, zigzagging between the stopped vehicles. A girl, seemingly 10 or 11 years old, with ragged clothes and a face marked by the dirt of the streets. It wasn't long before she tapped on the Mercedes's rear window. Raphael saw Arthur make a disapproving gesture, waving his hand for the girl to move away. The scene repeated almost daily. Children, adults, elderly, all asking for some kind of help at the city's traffic lights. Raphael usually ignored them, not out of cruelty, but because he had learned that giving money on the street didn't solve anyone's problem. He preferred to make monthly donations to reputable charities, recognized NGOs. It was more efficient, more organized. But something about that specific girl bothered him. Perhaps it was her persistence. She kept tapping on the window, despite Arthur's abrupt gestures. Raphael felt a strange, almost irrational impulse. Before he could question himself, he lowered the tinted window a few inches. The child's face appeared in the opening. Enormous brown eyes, too intelligent for someone of that age and in that situation. She wasn't crying. She wasn't making the pleading expression Raphael was used to seeing. There was something different there, a disturbing seriousness. "Sir," the girl said, her voice coming out in an urgent whisper, "I need to talk to you. It's important." Raphael raised an eyebrow. Arthur turned from the front seat, clearly annoyed. "Mr. Stone, don't pay attention. These children are trained to deceive. I'll wave her away again." "No," Raphael said, surprising himself. "Wait." He looked at the girl again. There was something in those eyes, something that awakened a curiosity he couldn't name. "What do you want?" Raphael asked, keeping his tone neutral. The girl looked around, as if fearing being overheard. When she turned back to Raphael, her words tumbled out, but firmly. "You're getting married in 2 weeks, aren't you? To that tall, blonde woman who always wears red high heels?" Raphael felt his blood run cold. How did that child know that? He wasn't exactly a celebrity, though his name circulated in business circles. But the specific details about Catherine, about the impending wedding, were information only close acquaintances knew. "How do you know that?" Raphael's voice came out harsher than he intended. The girl wasn't intimidated. "I saw her, sir. I saw her with a man. It wasn't you. They were talking about money, a lot of money, about tricking someone, about running away after getting what they wanted." The surrounding traffic noise seemed to recede. Raphael felt as if he were in a tunnel where only he and that child existed. Her words were absurd, impossible. Catherine was from a traditional family, had her own money, her own reputation. It made no sense at all. "You're lying," Raphael said, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Why? What do you gain from this?" "I don't want anything, sir." The girl shook her head vehemently. "I just didn't want to see a good person get tricked. You seem like a good person. That woman isn't." Before Raphael could respond, the traffic began to move. A car behind honked impatiently. Arthur automatically put the Mercedes in motion. Raphael turned, still trying to see the girl through the rear window, but she had already disappeared among the cars like a ghost. "Mr. Stone," Arthur said after a few seconds of silence. "Don't take it seriously. These children overhear conversations, they invent stories. She probably saw a photo of you with Ms. Maxwell on social media." Raphael didn't answer. He was looking straight ahead, but his mind was working at maximum speed. The child's words echoed. A man, money, tricking, running away. They were serious accusations, even absurd. But why would she say that? What street child would invent such a specific story without asking for anything in return? When he arrived at the office, a glass-paneled business complex in Canary Wharf, Raphael was completely distracted. His secretary, Monica, was already waiting for him with the day's agenda and an espresso. She immediately noticed something was wrong. "Good morning, Mr. Stone. Is everything all right? You seem worried." "I'm fine, Monica." Raphael forced a smile. "Just thinking about the meeting. Have the Japanese investors arrived?" "Yes, they have. They've been in the meeting room since 8:30. Very punctual." The meeting was supposed to be the most important moment of the week. Raphael was about to close a £120 million deal with a group of investors from Tokyo interested in building a luxury hotel complex in Mai, the City of London area. It was the kind of contract that would further solidify his empire, putting him on another level. But throughout the presentation, as he showed slides with projections, architectural plans, and feasibility studies, his mind was elsewhere. He found himself thinking about Catherine, about the 2 years they had been together. They met at a charity auction. She was stunning in a navy blue dress, conversing fluently in French with a couple of European businessmen. The attraction was instant. Raphael had always been selective with relationships, but Catherine seemed too perfect to let pass. Their courtship was fast, intense. Dinners at sophisticated restaurants, trips to Miami and Paris, social events where they formed the most photographed couple. Catherine was affectionate, attentive, always interested in his business, perhaps too interested. Raphael shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought. No, that was ridiculous. He was letting the words of a street child plant seeds of doubt in a solid relationship. "Mr. Stone?" The voice of one of the Japanese investors brought him back to reality. "Could you repeat the part about the return on investment?" Raphael blinked, realizing he had completely lost his train of thought. Monica, who was attending the meeting, discreetly advanced the slide back, saving him from embarrassment. He resumed the presentation, but knew he wasn't at his best. The Japanese were too polite to show it, but Raphael noticed the glances exchanged between them. When the meeting finally ended, with a formal handshake and the promise of a response within 48 hours, Raphael returned to his office and closed the door. He loosened his tie and sank into the leather armchair. He pulled out his cell phone and almost reflexively opened photos of Catherine. Dozens of them. Catherine smiling on a Caribbean beach. Catherine toasting with champagne on his birthday. Catherine kissing his face at a New Year's Eve party. He zoomed in on one of the photos, studying her face. Those blue eyes, always so expressive, always so full of affection when she looked at him. How could there be any falsehood there? And yet the nagging little voice whispered in his mind again. Do you really know this woman? Do you know her family? Have you ever been to her parents' house? Raphael frowned. Now that he thought about it, he had never met Catherine's family. She always had an excuse. Her parents traveled a lot, were in Europe, in Japan, on unavoidable commitments. Always something that made a meeting impossible, and Raphael, so focused on his own business, had never insisted. It seemed natural at the time, but now, in the light of that girl's words, it began to seem strange. He checked the clock. It was almost 2 in the afternoon. Catherine was at home, probably choosing final wedding details with the wedding planner. Raphael picked up the phone and called her. The call went straight to voicemail. Strange, Catherine always answered his calls. He tried again. Same thing. A restlessness began to grow in his chest. Raphael stood up, went to the panoramic window overlooking the city. Below, London buzzed, indifferent to his thoughts. He needed to clarify this. He needed to find that girl again, ask questions, understand where that absurd information came from. "Monica," Raphael called over the intercom, "cancel my afternoon schedule. I have an urgent personal matter to resolve." "But sir, you have the meeting with the bank people at 3:30. "Reschedule it for tomorrow. Tell them I had an emergency." He picked up the keys to his personal car, a Porsche. Cayenne he rarely drove, preferring to leave Arthur at the wheel of the Mercedes. But today he needed to be alone. He needed to think. He left the office, leaving Monica with a confused and worried expression. Raphael drove through the streets of London without a specific destination, but unconsciously returning to the area where he had met the girl that morning. He passed Oxford Street, drove down towards Regent Street, searching. For what exactly? He didn't know. A child in a city of 12 million inhabitants. The chances were minimal. But he had to try. He parked the Porsche at a spot he judged safe and got out on foot. He walked along the busy sidewalks, observing people's faces, especially the children who roamed, begging for alms. None of them were the girl. He passed shops, newsstands, bus stops. Nothing. 2 hours later, as the sun began to set on the horizon, Raphael was about to give up. Maybe Arthur was right. Maybe it was just a child repeating stories she overheard by chance, trying to get attention. He was being ridiculous, letting paranoia take over. Catherine was his fiancée, the woman he had chosen to spend the rest of his life with. He needed to trust her. That's when he saw her. At the entrance to Victoria Underground Station, sitting on the ground with her legs crossed, was the girl. She was holding a piece of bread, breaking it in half, and offering half to a scrawny stray dog that rubbed against her legs. The scene was so natural, so full of humanity, that Raphael felt something tighten in his chest. He approached slowly, not wanting to scare her. The girl looked up and, recognizing him, didn't seem surprised. It was as if she had been waiting. "You came back," she said simply. Raphael knelt down, getting to her level. Up close, he could see her face better. Beneath the dirt, she was a beautiful child, with delicate features and those incredibly expressive eyes. "I need you to tell me everything," Raphael said, keeping his voice calm. "Everything you saw, everything you heard, and I need to know why you told me this." The girl looked at the dog, which had finished its half of the bread and was now resting beside her. Then she turned her eyes back to Raphael. "My name is Isabella, sir, and I didn't lie to you. I did see that woman, and she's not who you think she is." Raphael sat on the ground next to Isabella, completely forgetting that he was wearing a £5,000 Italian suit. People hurried past the underground station, some casting curious glances at the elegant executive talking to a street child, but he didn't care. At that moment, nothing else existed but the words he was about to hear. Isabella stroked the stray dog one more time before she began to speak. Her voice was low but clear, each word chosen carefully. "It was at Westfield, London. Sir, I was there because sometimes I can get some leftovers in the food court when the security guards aren't looking. I saw her coming out of a very expensive clothing store, one of those that only have about 3 dresses in the window. She was with a man, tall, kind of blonde hair, wearing sunglasses. They weren't touching, but you could tell they were close. You know when two people stand very close to each other, like whispering?" Raphael felt his stomach clench. Westfield, London was exactly where Catherine said she would spend yesterday afternoon, choosing a dress for her bachelorette party. But she had said she would go alone with the wedding planner. "Continue," Raphael said, his voice coming out hoarser than he would have liked. "They went to the parking lot. I followed them, keeping my distance. The man opened the door of a big black car and they stayed inside talking. I was hidden behind a pillar, but I could hear parts of the conversation." Her voice was different, sir. It wasn't that soft voice she must use with you. It was colder, more calculating. Raphael closed his eyes for a moment. This cannot be happening, he thought. But he asked Isabella to continue. They were talking about powers of attorney, about transferring assets, about signing papers. The man said he was getting impatient, that the plan was taking too long. and she replied that she had to be careful, that you were smart, that she couldn't raise suspicions before the wedding. Then she said something that chilled me, sir. She said that as soon as she got the signature on the bank powers of attorney, they would flee abroad, that they had bought tickets to Spain, that there you would never find them. Raphael stood up abruptly, his legs trembling. He took a few steps, ran his hands through his perfectly combed hair, messing it up for the first time in years. That couldn't be true. Catherine, the woman who kissed him every morning, who said, "I love you," every night, who seemed so eager for the wedding. All a lie? All planned? "Why are you telling me this?" Raphael turned to Isabella, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. "What do you gain from this? You want money, is that it?" Isabella looked at him with those immense eyes, and Raphael saw something that completely disarmed him. There was no malice there, no calculation. There was only a crystalline honesty that he rarely saw even in the adults of his social circle. "Sir, my mother always said that we have to help the good people in the world. She said there are a lot of bad people out there, but when you find someone good, you have an obligation to protect them. When I saw you in the car this morning, something told me you were the good kind. And when I connected the dots, when I realized that the woman I had seen at the mall was the same one who was going to marry you, I couldn't keep quiet." Raphael felt a lump in his throat. He took his wallet from his pocket, pulled out some £100 notes, and held them out to Isabella. She looked at the money, then at him, and shook her head. "I don't want it, sir. If you want to give me something, give me food. But not money. Money attracts bad people, and I already have enough problems living on the street." Raphael put the money back, feeling strangely humiliated. When was the last time someone had refused money from him? When was the last time someone had shown genuine interest in his well-being without expecting anything in return? "Isabella," he said, crouching down beside her again, "you said your mother always said that. Where is she now?" The girl's face closed. She looked down at the dog that was sleeping peacefully. "She's gone, sir. 6 months ago. It was just the two of us. I never knew my father. When she left, I had no one else. I tried to stay with some neighbors, but they couldn't afford to keep me. I ended up on the streets. It's hard, but I manage. I have popcorn here," she pointed to the dog. "We protect each other." Raphael felt a pang in his chest. Here was a child who had lost everything, who lived on the streets of a ruthless metropolis, and yet had chosen to use the little she had seen to protect a stranger. Meanwhile, he, with all his money and power, was about to be deceived by the woman he trusted most. "Isabella, I need your help," Raphael said, an idea beginning to form in his mind. "I need you to keep an eye on Catherine, discreetly. See who she meets, what she does. Can you do that?" Isabella nodded but seemed worried. "Sir, if she's as dangerous as I think she is, she might realize she's being watched. Then be careful, very careful." Raphael took a business card from the inner pocket of his jacket and wrote a number on the back. "This is my personal cell phone. Call me on this number if you find out anything. And Isabella," he held the girl's small, dirty hand, "thank you. You might have saved my life." Raphael returned home that night with his head buzzing. His apartment in Belgravia was a luxury triplex penthouse, with panoramic views of the city, decorated by one of the country's most sought-after designers. Everything there screamed success, power, achievement. But as he walked through the door, everything seemed empty and cold. Catherine was there, reclining on the grey velvet sofa, leafing through a bridal magazine. She looked up when he entered, and her face lit up with that smile that always melted his defenses. "Darling, you're home. I thought you'd be at the office longer." She stood up and came to him, planting a soft kiss on his lips. Raphael had to make a conscious effort not to pull away. "I had a free afternoon," he lied, observing every detail of her reaction. "I tried to call you, but it went to voicemail." "Oh, really?" Catherine picked up her designer bag from the sofa and checked her phone. "Oh, you're right, I guess I had no signal. I spent the whole afternoon with Rose, the wedding planner, finalizing decoration details. It was exhausting, darling." She threw herself back onto the sofa, as if genuinely tired. Raphael watched her with renewed attention. Every gesture, every word, every facial expression. Was there falsehood there? Or was he just being paranoid because of a street child's words? "How was your day?" he asked, pouring himself a whiskey at the living room bar. "What else did you do besides look at decorations?" Catherine didn't hesitate. "Oh, I stopped by the designer's shop for the final dress fitting. It's perfect, darling. You'll be speechless when you see me walking down the aisle. Then I went to the salon to touch up my nails. You know how meticulous I am with those details. And then I came straight home. Why, did you miss me?" She smiled alluringly, but Raphael felt a chill. Catherine hadn't mentioned Westfield. She hadn't mentioned meeting anyone. Was it just an omission or a deliberate lie? "I always miss you," he said automatically, but his brain was already working on another level. That night, as Catherine slept beside him, her breathing slow and regular, Raphael lay awake staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, he would hire the best private detective in London. He needed facts, concrete proof. He couldn't destroy a 2-year relationship based solely on the words of a child, no matter how sincere she seemed. But he also couldn't ignore the signs he was beginning to notice. The way Catherine changed the subject whenever he asked about her family. The mysterious trips she took alone, always with vague excuses. Her interest in knowing every detail of his businesses, his assets. At the time, Raphael had interpreted it as genuine love and curiosity. What if it was something more sinister? The next day, Raphael woke up determined. Even before breakfast, he called Maurice Saunders, a private detective he had previously used for corporate investigations. Maurice had a reputation for being discreet, efficient, and capable of uncovering any secret, no matter how well guarded. "Maurice, I need you for an urgent and extremely confidential job," Raphael said when the detective answered. "Tell me, Mr. Davies. I'm at your disposal. I want a full investigation into Catherine Vasconcelos, past, present, family, finances, everything, and I want it yesterday." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Davies, isn't this your fiancée? The one you're marrying in 2 weeks?" "Precisely why I need the information as soon as possible. Can you do it?" "I can, but it will be expensive and will require some resources that, shall we say, operate in a grey area of legality." "I don't care about the price, and as for legality, be discreet. I need answers, Maurice. True answers." "Understood. I'll start today. You should have something preliminary in 48 hours. Raphael hung up and took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. He had set in motion a machine that would reveal the truth, whatever it might be. Part of him hoped he was wrong, hoped Isabella had been confused, that it was all just a misunderstanding. But another part, the part that had built an empire based on instinct and reading people, knew that something was deeply wrong. His phone rang. It was an unknown number. Raphael answered quickly, his heart racing. "Mr. Davies." It was Isabella's voice. "She just left the building. She's getting into a taxi. Do you want me to follow?" Raphael looked at Catherine, who was still sleeping peacefully in the bedroom. How did Isabella know where his building was? The girl was smarter than he had imagined. "Yes, follow her. But be careful. Call me when you know where she went." Raphael spent the morning at the office, but his mind was far from business. He attended meetings on autopilot, signed documents without really reading them. His secretary asked 3 times if everything was all right. Around 11 in the morning, Isabella called again. "Sir, she went to a building in Canary Wharf. I think it's an office or something. She went up and stayed there for over an hour. When she came down, she was with that man from the shopping mall, the blonde one with sunglasses." Raphael gripped the phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Did you manage to take a photo?" "I did, sir, but it's from a distance." "Do you want me to send it?" "Send it." Seconds later, the photo arrived. It was shaky and taken from a bad angle, but it clearly showed Catherine leaving the building next to a tall man with blonde hair and sunglasses. They weren't touching, but the closeness between them. The way she laughed at something he said, all of it conveyed an intimacy that made Raphael's blood boil. The next 48 hours were the longest of Raphael's life. He maintained a facade of normalcy with Catherine, dining with her, discussing wedding details, smiling at appropriate moments, but inside he was breaking apart. Every kiss from her felt like a betrayal. Every declaration of love sounded like a rehearsed lie. Maurice called in the middle of a rainy Thursday afternoon. "Mr. Davies, I need to meet you in person. I have the full report. I think it's better we discuss this face to face." The grim tone in the detective's voice confirmed Raphael's worst fears. They arranged to meet at a discreet cafe in Notting Hill, far from the places Raphael usually frequented. When he arrived, Maurice was already there, a brown folder on the table, his expression grave. "Sit down, Mr. Davies." "What? I have to tell you won't be easy to hear." Raphael sat down, ordered an espresso he knew he wouldn't be able to drink, and waited. Maurice opened the folder slowly, as if revealing something painful. "Catherine Vasconcelos doesn't exist," Maurice began bluntly. "I mean, she exists, but she's not who she says she is. The real Catherine Vasconcelos is an heiress from London who has been living in Paris for 5 years. The woman you're about to marry stole her identity." Raphael felt the world spin. "What?" Maurice turned over some documents. "Her real name is Carla Smith. Daughter, father mechanic and a seamstress from Dagenham. She grew up in the suburbs, had a difficult life. At 19, she met a man named Roderick Matthews." He pointed to a photo of the blonde man. Together, they created a sophisticated scheme of matrimonial scams targeting wealthy men. Raphael picked up the photo, studying every detail of Roderick Matthews' face. There was something cruel in those eyes, even hidden behind the sunglasses. "How does the scheme work?" Raphael asked, his voice surprisingly calm. "Simple but effective. Carla assumes the identity of wealthy women, usually using very high-quality forged documents. She infiltrates elite social circles, meets successful men, wins them over. During the relationship, she collects information about their assets, investments, bank accounts. The ultimate goal is always the same: to get the man to sign powers of attorney that give her access to his property. Once she has the powers of attorney, she and Roderick empty the accounts and disappear." "And it works?" Raphael asked, already knowing the answer. "It works all too well." Maurice turned more pages, revealing photos of other men. "I've identified at least 4 victims in the last 6 years. A businessman from Manchester who lost 20 million. A doctor from Edinburgh, 15 million. A farmer from Yorkshire, 10 million, all ruined. Some had nervous breakdowns. One tried to end his own life." Raphael closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He had been so blind, so easily manipulated. The entire relationship, every intimate moment, every declaration of love, it was all just an elaborate play. "There's more," Maurice continued, his voice growing even graver. "I managed to intercept some messages between Carla and Roderick. They're planning to accelerate the scam. They suspect someone might have discovered the scheme. The plan is to convince you to marry civilly as soon as possible under some urgent pretext. Once married, it will be easier to obtain the powers of attorney." "When?" Raphael asked, opening his eyes. "Tomorrow, if they can, or within the next few days at most." Raphael leaned back in his chair, processing everything. His entire life, everything he had worked for, was one step away from being destroyed by a woman who wasn't even named Catherine. Anger began to simmer within him, but it was a cold, calculated anger. He hadn't built an empire by being impulsive. He wouldn't start now. "What do you advise me to do?" Raphael asked Maurice. The detective closed the folder. "Go to the police. With the evidence I have here, they can arrest both Carla and Roderick. Their record is extensive. They are wanted in 3 counties. Raphael nodded slowly. But first, he had something to do. Someone he needed to protect. Someone who, ironically, had been more loyal to him than anyone in his adult life. He drove to Victoria Station again. It was almost 7 in the evening, and the area was bustling with people returning from work. Raphael scanned the area until he found Isabella. She was sitting in the same spot, sharing a piece of pizza with popcorn. "Isabella," Raphael called, approaching her. The girl looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Mr. Davies, did you find anything?" "I found everything, Isabella. And you were right about everything." Raphael crouched beside her. That's why I came to get you. It's not safe for you to stay here. If they find out you're helping me—" Isabella frowned. "They don't even know I exist, sir." "Not yet. But I can't take the risk." Raphael looked into her eyes seriously. "Isabella, I want you to come with me. I'll give you a place to stay, food, security, at least until all this is over." The girl looked at Popcorn, then back at Raphael, clear hesitation on her face. "Sir, I don't know if—" "Please," Raphael said, and there was a genuine urgency in his voice. "You saved me, Isabella. Now let me protect you." Isabella bit her lip, thinking. Finally, she nodded. "All right, but Popcorn comes with me." "Of course he does." Raphael took Isabella and Popcorn to a flat he owned in Kensington. It was small but comfortable and, more importantly, safe. He bought new clothes. For her, food for Popcorn, and arranged for a trusted employee to stay nearby in case Isabella needed anything. When he finally returned to his apartment, it was past 10 at night. Catherine was on the sofa, a glass of red wine in her hand, a worried expression on her face. "Darling, where were you? I tried to call you 1,000 times. I was worried." Raphael had to make a superhuman effort not to explode. "I had a meeting that ran late. Problems with a contract." Catherine stood up and went to him. She placed her hands on his chest, looking at him with those blue eyes that no longer had the same effect. "You've been so distant lately. Is everything all right? Are you scared of the wedding?" This was his cue, his opportunity. "No, darling," Raphael said, forcing a smile. "In fact, I was just thinking about that. What if we didn't wait 2 weeks?" Catherine blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" "What if we got married sooner, civilly? Just the two of us, without all the pomp. We can have the big party later, but I want you to be my wife as soon as possible." He carefully observed her reaction. He saw the flash of excitement that crossed her eyes before she managed to control her expression. It was exactly what Maurice had predicted. She was waiting for this opening. "Darling, what kind of craziness is this?" Catherine laughed, but her voice had a different note. "We've already planned everything. The invitations, the church, the guests." "I know, but suddenly I realized I don't want to wait anymore. I want you to be my wife now, tomorrow if possible." Catherine stepped back, pretending to think, but Raphael could see the gears working in her head. "Well, if that's what you really want," she said slowly, "I guess we can do that. Get married civilly tomorrow and keep the church ceremony as planned. It would even be romantic." "Perfect," Raphael said, pulling her in for a kiss that cost him everything to give. "I'll arrange everything in the morning." That night, with Catherine sleeping beside him for the last time, Raphael sent a message to Maurice. "Put the police on standby. Tomorrow, I will give them every reason they need to act." The next morning, Raphael woke up before Catherine. He dressed carefully, choosing a charcoal grey suit, his armour for what was to come. When Catherine came down for breakfast, he was already in the living room, drinking coffee and pretending to read emails on his tablet. "Good morning, darling. Ready to become my wife today?" Catherine smiled, but there was a tension in her posture. "Raphael, about that, we really need to talk." Here it is, Raphael thought. The moment the mask would fall. She sat beside him, taking his hands. "Darling, something happened. Some friends of mine warned me that dangerous people are following us. People who are jealous of our success, who might want to harm us. I think it would be safer if we formalized our union as soon as possible, and also perhaps if you could sign some powers of attorney, just as a precaution, you know, so I can move accounts if something happens to you." Raphael had to admire the audacity. There she was, executing the scam even though he had been the one to suggest the civil marriage. She was so confident in her manipulation that she didn't even realize he was one step ahead. "Catherine," Raphael said calmly. "I know." She blinked. "You know what?" "I know. Everything. I know your name isn't Catherine Vasconcelos. I know about Roderick. I know about the other men you've deceived. I know the whole plan." The blood drained from Catherine's face, or rather Carla's. For a second she froze. Then, to Raphael's surprise, she started to laugh. a loud, almost hysterical laugh. "Oh, really? And what are you going to do? Report me?" She stood up, all sweetness vanishing from her voice. "You have no proof of anything, Raphael. And if you try to harm me, I'll go to the press. I'll say you used me, abused me. I'll destroy your reputation, your company, everything." Raphael stood up too, maintaining his calm. "You're mistaken, Carla. I have all the evidence, your complete history, photos of you with Roderick, intercepted messages, and I've already handed everything over to the police." Carla's expression changed. Defiance gave way to panic. She quickly grabbed her bag and ran for the door. Raphael didn't try to stop her. He didn't need to. When she opened the door, 2 police officers were on the other side. "Carla Smith," one of them asked, "you're under arrest." The days following Carla and Roderick's capture were a whirlwind of depositions, meetings with lawyers, and interviews with the press. The story of Raphael Davies, the successful businessman who was almost a victim of an elaborate marriage scam, went viral on social media and occupied headlines in the country's major newspapers. But Raphael remained steadfast, giving only necessary statements and protecting his privacy as much as possible. What no one besides him and his closest lawyers knew was the crucial role Isabella had played in the entire story. Raphael made sure to keep the girl's identity a secret, protecting her from the spotlight and any possible retaliation. A week after the capture, Raphael visited the flat where Isabella was staying. When he rang the doorbell, he was greeted by a transformed version of the girl he had met on the street. Isabella was clean, wearing new clothes, her hair cut and styled. But what impressed Raphael most were her eyes, still deep and intelligent, but now shining with a hope he hadn't seen before. "Mr. Davies," Isabella ran to hug him. The employee taking care of her smiled at the scene. "How are you, little one?" Raphael asked, feeling a strange emotion tighten his chest. "I'm good, very good." Isabella pulled him inside. "Mrs. Martha here is teaching me how to cook, and Popcorn is plump, look." The mongrel dog, now clean and well-fed, wagged his tail energetically at the sight of Raphael. The businessman sat on the sofa, observing the apartment. There were Isabella's drawings scattered across the table, children's books he had bought for her, new toys. It looked like a real home. "Isabella, I need to talk to you about something important," Raphael said, becoming serious. The girl sat beside him, suddenly tense. "Did I do something wrong?" No, on the contrary." Raphael took a deep breath. "Isabella, you saved my life, not just financially, but in a much deeper way. You showed me that I was living in a world of appearances, surrounded by people who only cared about what I had, not who I was." Isabella watched him intently, processing every word. "That's why I'd like to do something for you, something permanent." Raphael took her small hands. "I want to start the legal process to become your guardian, and eventually, if you want, officially adopt you. I want you to be my daughter." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Are you serious, sir?" "Completely. Serious? But only if you want to, Isabella. I don't want you to feel pressured. It's a big decision." Isabella threw her arms around Raphael's neck, sobbing. "Yes, I do, Mr. Davies. I really do." Raphael felt his own tears stream down his face. How many years had passed since he last cried? He couldn't remember. But there, hugging that brave girl who had completely changed his life, he allowed the emotions to flow freely. The following months were a period of profound transformation. Raphael hired the best lawyers to expedite the adoption process. He discovered that, as Isabella had no living relatives and was in a vulnerable situation, the process could be relatively quick, especially considering he had all the financial and emotional conditions to care for her. But more important than the legal formalities was the change Isabella brought to Raphael's life. He sold the cold and impersonal apartment in the City of London and bought a spacious house in Richmond with a large yard where Popcorn could run freely and where there was space for Isabella to play. Raphael completely reorganized his routine. He drastically reduced his working hours, delegating more responsibilities to his trusted partners. He started leaving the office at 5 in the afternoon religiously to pick Isabella up from the private school where he had enrolled her. They had dinner together every night, talking about their day, about the friends she was making, about the subjects she liked most. At first, Isabella was cautious, as if expecting it all to be just a dream from which she would wake up back on the streets. But gradually, with Raphael's consistency and genuine affection, she began to open up. Her personality blossomed, revealing an intelligent, curious girl with a sharp sense of humor and a natural empathy for people. One afternoon, 6 months after the adoption was officially finalized, Isabella was helping Raphael arrange books on the library shelf when she asked a question that caught him off guard. "Dad," she had started calling him that naturally a few weeks after the adoption, "why don't you have a wife?" Raphael stopped what he was doing, holding a book in the air. The question was simple, but loaded with meaning. How could I have trusted anyone after what happened? "Well," he said slowly, putting the book back on the shelf, "I had a bad experience with relationships. I became a bit jaded." Isabella wrinkled her nose, as she always did when thinking deeply. "But Dad, not everyone is bad like that woman. Mrs. Martha always says we can't give up on the good things in life because of the bad ones." Raphael smiled. "Mrs. Martha is very wise. But you know, Isabella, I don't need a wife to be happy. I have you. And you are the best thing that has ever happened in my life." Isabella smiled, but there was something in her eyes that said the conversation wasn't over, and Raphael would soon discover that his daughter had plans of her own. 2 weeks later, on a sunny Saturday, Raphael and Isabella went to Hyde Park to fly a kite. It was an activity they had started doing regularly, a moment of pure joy and relaxation. Isabella loved watching her colorful kite soar higher and higher in the blue London sky. They were so focused on the kite that they almost didn't notice the woman approaching with a golden retriever on a leash. The dog, friendly and energetic, ran up to Popcorn, whom Raphael had brought along. The two dogs started playing, and it was impossible not to notice the Golden's owner. She was beautiful, in a natural, unpretentious way. Brown hair tied in a simple ponytail, jeans and a t-shirt with the logo of a vet clinic. No makeup, no expensive jewelry, none of the artificiality of the women from the social circle Raphael usually frequented. "Sorry," she said, smiling as she tried to control the Golden. "Thor is very playful. He won't hurt your dog, I promise." "It's all right," Raphael replied, also smiling. "Popcorn loves making new friends." Isabella, always direct, intervened. "Your dog is beautiful. What's his name?" "Thor," the woman replied, crouching down to Isabella's height. "And yours?" "Popcorn. I found him on the street. Now he lives with me and my dad." The woman looked at Raphael, and their eyes met for a brief moment. There was something there, a subtle spark Raphael hadn't felt in a long time. "How lovely," she said. "Rescued animals are the best. By the way, I'm a vet. If you need anything for Popcorn, my clinic is nearby." She extended her hand. "Mariana Smith." Raphael shook her hand, feeling the warmth and firmness of her grip. "Raphael Allen, and this is my daughter, Isabella." The three talked for a few minutes about dogs, about the park, about pleasantries. Mariana was easy to talk to, unpretentious, genuinely interested in what they were saying. When they finally said goodbye, Raphael found himself thinking about her all the way back home. Isabella, sitting in the back seat of the car, had a mischievous smile on her face. "She's nice, isn't she, Dad?" Raphael looked in the rearview mirror. "Who?" "Mariana. I thought she was very friendly." Raphael shook his head, smiling. "You're impossible, you know." But in the following Saturdays, Raphael found himself choosing Hyde Park for outings with Isabella, always at the same time. And magically, Mariana always appeared with Thor. The casual encounters turned into longer conversations, then quick coffees at the park kiosk, always with Isabella strategically creating opportunities for the adults to talk. Mariana was different from all the women Raphael had known. She had grown up in a middle-class family in Manchester, studied veterinary medicine at the University of London on a scholarship, and worked hard to open her own clinic. She had no interest in social status or appearances. Her true passion was animals, especially abandoned ones. She dedicated part of her free time to an NGO that rescued street dogs. It was precisely this passion that created a deep connection with Isabella, who told Mariana about her past on the streets, about how popcorn had been her only companion during the toughest days. Mariana listened with genuine attention, without pity or condescension, only with empathy and respect. And Raphael found himself opening up in ways he hadn't in years. He told Mariana about his journey of building an empire from scratch, about the loneliness that had always accompanied his success, about the scam he had almost fallen for, and how Isabella had saved not only his fortune, but his very soul. 3 months after their first meeting in the park, Mariana accepted Raphael's invitation to dinner at his house. Isabella, enthusiastic, insisted on helping prepare everything, choosing the flowers for the table, arranging the place settings with care. The dinner was perfect. They talked for hours, laughing, sharing stories, discovering surprising affinities. When Mariana left, late at night, Raphael found himself at the door watching her car drive away, feeling a sensation he had forgotten existed, genuine hope for a shared future. Isabella appeared beside him in her pajamas, holding popcorn. "You like her, don't you, Dad?" Raphael looked at his daughter, at that incredible girl who had changed his life in so many ways. "Yes, Isabella, I do, very much." "Then marry her," Isabella said, with the brutal simplicity of children. "We could be a real family with a mom, a dad, a daughter, and 2 dogs. The relationship between Raphael and Mariana blossomed naturally and organically, very different from the rehearsed and calculated romance he had lived with Carla. There was no rush, no pressure, just 2 adults rediscovering the beauty of a genuine connection, facilitated by Isabella's joyful and sometimes overly enthusiastic presence. Mariana started frequenting the house more regularly. She and Isabella developed a beautiful relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Mariana never tried to assume a motherly role, understanding that Isabella had her own wounds and her own pace. She was more like an older friend, a confidant, someone Isabella instinctively trusted. Family dinners became routine. Raphael discovered he enjoyed cooking, something he had never done when he lived alone in his bachelor apartment, always ordering takeout or dining at expensive restaurants. Now he and Mariana prepared meals together while Isabella set the table, recounting details of her day at school, chattering about friends, about classes, about everything and nothing at the same time. Popcorn and Thor became best friends, just like their owners. Weekends were dedicated to family outings. They went to the beach in Brighton, hiked in the Lake District, visited museums in central London. These were simple activities, but they brought Raphael a happiness all his money had never been able to buy. One night, 6 months after they had met, Raphael and Mariana were on the house's veranda, drinking wine while Isabella slept. The London sky, rarely starry, due to light pollution, was exceptionally clear. "Mariana," Raphael said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never thought I'd be able to trust someone again. After what happened with Carla, I had convinced myself that true relationships didn't exist, that people always had ulterior motives." Mariana took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "And now?" "Now I know I was wrong. You showed me that genuine goodness still exists in the world, that there are still people who love you for who you are, not for what you have." Mariana smiled, her eyes shining in the soft light of the veranda. "Raphael, I grew up with nothing. My parents were public school teachers. They earned little, but they gave us everything that mattered: love, education, values. I learned early on that money comes and goes, but character is forever. When I met you, I didn't see a rich businessman. I saw a good man who was rebuilding his life alongside an incredible daughter. That's what attracted me." Raphael pulled Mariana closer, kissing her tenderly. "I love you," he said, the words coming naturally for the first time in years. "I love you too," Mariana replied, her voice soft as a caress. From Isabella's room, where she was supposedly sleeping, came an excited whisper. "Finally!" The girl had heard everything, and Raphael couldn't help but laugh. Months turned into a year. Raphael's life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. His focus was no longer exclusively on business. He was still successful, still closing important deals, but he had learned to balance work and personal life in a way that had previously seemed impossible. Isabella was thriving at school. She was a diligent student, especially in math and science. Her teachers always commented on her emotional maturity, on her natural empathy for her classmates. She had become a confident, happy girl, completely different from the scared child who used to tap on car windows asking for help. Mariana had become an integral part of the family. She slept at the house at least 3 times a week, had her own drawers in Raphael's closet, her toiletries in the bathroom. Thor spent as much time at the house as Popcorn. They lived like a family, just without the official paperwork. It was Isabella, with her characteristic frankness, who brought the subject up. It was a rainy Sunday. The 3 of them were in the living room watching a movie when she suddenly paused the television. "Guys, we need to talk," she said, with a seriousness that comically contrasted with her 11 years. Raphael and Mariana exchanged amused glances. "About what, Princess?" Raphael asked. "About you two." Isabella pointed at them. "You live together. You love each other. You're happy. Why don't you just get married?" Mariana blushed slightly. "Isabella, these things take time." "A year is enough time," Isabella retorted. "At my school, Julia said her parents got engaged after 3 months. You've been past that for ages." Raphael laughed, but realized Isabella had a point. He and Mariana effectively lived as a married couple. The only thing missing was the formal commitment. And why hadn't they taken that step? Fear? Caution after the trauma with Carla? "She's right, you know," Raphael said, looking at Mariana. "We're already a family. Maybe it's time to make it official." Mariana looked at him, surprised. "Raphael Allen, are you proposing to me in front of your daughter during a Sunday movie?" Raphael stood up, took Mariana's hand and knelt dramatically in front of her. Isabella applauded enthusiastically. "Mariana Smith, will you marry me? I don't have a ring now, but I promise to buy the most beautiful one I can find." Mariana's eyes were filled with tears, but she was smiling. "You're impossible. But yes, I accept. Of course I accept." Isabella jumped off the sofa, hugging them both. "Finally, I'm going to have a real mom." Mariana looked at Isabella, moved. "Isabella, I will never try to replace your true mother. She will always have a special place in your heart." "I know," Isabella said, her voice choked, "but you also have a special place, a different place, but equally important." The 3 hugged. For a long moment, Popcorn and Thor joining the tangle of intertwined limbs, licking faces and wagging tails furiously. It was chaotic, far from the elegance Raphael usually associated with important moments, but it was perfectly imperfect. It was real. The wedding planning was completely different from Raphael's experience with Carla. No expensive wedding planners, no unnecessary ostentation. Mariana wanted something simple, intimate, meaningful. They decided to have the ceremony in the garden of their house, with only close friends and family. Isabella took on the role of junior organizer, choosing the flowers, deciding the menu, even suggesting that Popcorn and Thor be the ring-bearers. Raphael and Mariana let the girl participate in every decision, happy to see her enthusiasm. The wedding day arrived on a perfect spring morning. The garden was decorated with simple but beautiful flowers, white chairs arranged in a semicircle, an improvised altar under the large oak tree that dominated the backyard. Raphael was nervous in a way he hadn't been for the first wedding he almost had. But it was a good nervous. The anticipation of someone about to take an important step with the right person. His friend and business partner Maurice, the same detective who had helped him discover the truth about Carla, stood beside him as best man. "Blimey, Raphael," Maurice said, adjusting his friend's tie. "Who would have thought that nightmare with Carla would lead you to this? A real family." Raphael smiled. "The most beautiful things in life sometimes come from the most difficult situations." The music began to play. Isabella appeared first, beautiful in a light pink dress, carrying a small basket with flower petals. Popcorn and Thor followed her, with small cushions tied around their necks containing the rings. The scene drew laughter and emotional sighs from the guests. And then Mariana appeared. She had chosen a simple white dress without exaggeration, just her in her natural beauty. She walked alone through the garden, smiling, her eyes fixed on Raphael. There was no veil, no several-meter train, just a woman walking towards the man she loved. When she reached the altar, Raphael held her hands and realized he was crying. Tears of pure happiness, something he never imagined feeling again. The ceremony was short, personal, full of meaning. When it was time for the vows, Raphael improvised, speaking from the heart. Mariana, 2 years ago, my life was about to be destroyed. Not just financially, but emotionally. I was lost, surrounded by falsehood, unable to recognize what was real. And then a brave little girl tapped on my car window and changed everything. She saved me from imminent disaster, but more than that, she brought me to you. You taught me that true love exists, that family isn't about blood or status, but about choosing to be by someone's side every day. I promise to love you, respect you, and support you every day of my life. Mariana was openly crying now. Raphael, when I met you, I saw a man who was rediscovering what truly matters in life. I saw someone who had been hurt, but who chose not to close himself off from the world. I saw an incredible father learning to love truly. I promised to be by your side, through good days and bad, building this beautiful family we've formed together. When the justice of the peace declared them husband and wife, Isabella screamed with joy, and all present burst into applause. Raphael kissed Mariana under the oak tree, and in that moment he knew with absolute certainty that he had finally found his place in the world. The reception was joyful and unpretentious, homemade food, good music, people who genuinely cared about each other. None of the empty pomp Raphael used to associate with social events. This was real, it was true, it was perfect. As night fell and the guests began to leave, Raphael, Mariana, and Isabella stayed in the garden, watching the stars. Isabella was between them, holding both their hands. "Dad," she said suddenly, "do you remember that day in traffic?" "How could I forget?" Raphael replied, squeezing her hand. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened. If I hadn't had the courage to tap on your car window, if I had been scared." Raphael knelt in front of her. "But you had courage, Isabella. You were the bravest person I've ever met, and you changed my life completely." "You changed our life," Mariana corrected, also joining them. "You brought us together, little one. You're the one who created this family." 3 years had passed since that perfect garden wedding. Isabella was now 14, an articulate and brilliant teenager who continued to surprise Raphael and Mariana with her maturity and kindness. The scared street girl was now a confident young woman with dreams of becoming a lawyer to help vulnerable children, just as she herself had been. Raphael looked out the window of the wooden cabin where they were staying, watching the snow fall softly over the mountains of the Lake District. They had decided to spend their July holidays there, enjoying the English winter and the cozy mountain climate. It was a tradition they had started the previous year and planned to keep for years to come. Mariana was by his side, wrapped in a thick blanket, drinking hot chocolate. Isabella was on the sofa with Popcorn and Thor, who were now older and calmer dogs, reading a school book. The scene was one of domestic tranquility that made Raphael's heart swell with gratitude. "What are you thinking about?" Mariana asked, noticing her husband's distant gaze. Raphael smiled. "I was thinking about how life can change completely in a matter of seconds. If that traffic light hadn't closed on that specific day, if Isabella hadn't had the courage to tap on the window, if I had ignored her like I did with all the other children, our entire life, everything we have now, depended on that moment." Mariana intertwined her fingers with his. "I believe some things are destiny, you know, that certain people are destined to meet." From the sofa, Isabella looked up from her book. "Are you two being sappy again?" Raphael and Mariana laughed. "Always," Raphael replied. "You'll have to get used to it." Isabella rolled her eyes in an exaggerated way, but she was smiling. "Actually, I like it when you're sappy. It means you really love each other." She marked a page of her book and stood up, joining her parents at the window. The three stood there watching the snow fall, each lost in their own thoughts. "Dad," Isabella broke the silence, "do you know what Aunt Monica asked me the other day?" "What?" Raphael was curious. Monica, his former secretary, had become a kind of honorary aunt to Isabella. She asked me if I remembered life before you found me, if it was hard to talk about it. And what did you say? Isabella took a deep breath. I said yes, I remember. I remember the hunger, the cold, the fear. I remember staying awake at night, afraid someone would hurt me. I remember sharing food with popcorn and sometimes having nothing to share. But do you know what else I told her? What, my daughter? Mariana's voice was soft. I said I'm not ashamed of my past, because it's what brought me to you. It's what taught me to value the important things in life. My classmates at school sometimes complain about such small, insignificant things, and I keep thinking they don't know how lucky they are to have a family, a home, food on the table. Raphael hugged his daughter, feeling pride flood his chest. You're incredible, Isabella, more incredible than you imagine. Isabella nestled into the hug. You know what's funny? Sometimes I think about Carla. Raphael tensed. Isabella rarely mentioned that name. Why? Because in a strange way, she's also part of our story. If she hadn't tried to trick you, I never would have met you. You never would have adopted me. You and Mom never would have met. It's weird to think that something so bad brought such good things. Mariana caressed Isabella's hair. That's called resilience, darling. It's transforming pain into growth, tragedy into opportunity. What happened to her? Isabella asked. To Carla and that Roderick? Raphael sighed. This was something he had followed from a distance without much emotional involvement. They were convicted. Carla got 8 years, Roderick 10. They are serving their sentences now. The other victims also managed to recover part of what they lost through the legal proceedings. Isabella nodded, processing the information. I hope they managed to change, that they use this time to become better people. Raphael looked at his daughter with renewed admiration. At 14, she had more compassion and wisdom than most adults he knew. How could she, after everything she had been through, still have empathy, even for those who tried to harm her? You have a huge heart, Isabella, Raphael said. Never lose that. I won't lose it, she promised, because you two taught me that even when people disappoint us, we cannot stop believing in goodness. The conversation was interrupted by popcorn barking at the window. Outside, a bird had landed on the sill, leaving small footprints in the fresh snow. Thor also got up, interested, but without the energy of his younger years. Shall we make hot chocolate for everyone? Mariana suggested, wanting to lighten the heavy atmosphere of the conversation. Yes, Isabella exclaimed, and then we can build a fire in the fireplace and tell stories. The afternoon passed in perfect family harmony. They made hot chocolate, lit the fireplace, told silly stories that made everyone laugh until their stomachs hurt. They played board games, Isabella winning most of them with her sharp strategy. They made popcorn and watched an old movie that Raphael loved. When night fully fell and Isabella finally went to sleep, exhausted and happy, Raphael and Mariana stayed on the cabin's covered porch, watching the starry sky. Grasmere, far from London's light pollution, offered a spectacular view of the firmament. Mariana, Raphael suddenly said. Thank you. Why? She asked, surprised. For accepting me with all my baggage, for accepting Isabella, for building this family with me. I know it wasn't easy. I was a hurt, distrustful man with an adopted daughter who came from immense trauma. You could have chosen someone without complications. Mariana turned to face him. Raphael Alistair, you and Isabella are not complications. You are the best thing that has ever happened in my life. I spent years focused only on work, saving animals, but never stopping to build something for myself. When I met you, I realized what was missing. You don't need to thank me for loving you. It's a privilege. They kissed under the stars, and Raphael felt that familiar sensation of deep gratitude. His life could have taken such a different path. He could have married Carla, lost everything, become ruined and bitter. He could have ignored Isabella on that fateful day and continued his empty life as a successful but profoundly lonely executive. Instead, he had this: a wife who loved him for who he was, an extraordinary daughter who taught him daily about courage and kindness, a home full of laughter and love, 2 loyal dogs, true friends, a job that still challenged him but no longer consumed his entire existence. The next morning, the three went for a hike through the pine forest that surrounded the cabin. Isabella was ahead with the dogs, exploring, curious as ever. Raphael and Mariana followed behind, holding hands. "Dad, Mum," Isabella called to them from a clearing ahead. "Come see this." They approached and saw what had caught her attention. A deer and its fawn, standing at the edge of the forest, watching them with large, curious eyes. The scene was so perfect, so full of peace, that the three stood still, just observing. "It's beautiful," Isabella whispered. "A family like us." The deer and the fawn eventually turned and disappeared among the trees, but the feeling of magic remained. When they returned to the cabin for lunch, Raphael proposed a toast. He raised his glass of juice, looking at his wife and daughter with infinite love. "To our family," he said, "born from improbable circumstances, forged in adversity, but the most real and true thing I have ever had in my life." "To our family," Mariana and Isabella repeated in unison, clinking glasses. That night, his last in Grasmere, Raphael was packing when he found an old photo in the pocket of a coat he rarely wore. It was a picture of him with Carla, taken at some social event months before their thwarted wedding. They were smiling at the camera, but looking at it now, Raphael could see what he hadn't seen before. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her touch on his arm was calculated, not spontaneous. How had he not noticed? He was about to tear up the photo when Isabella entered the room. "What's that, Dad?" Raphael showed it to her. "A memory from another life." Isabella looked at the photo curiously. She was beautiful, at least on the outside. "Yes," Raphael agreed, "but beauty without kindness is empty." Isabella took the photo and studied it more closely. "You know what I think? She did me a favor. She tried to destroy you, but in the end she brought us together. And now you have something that none of her money could have bought. You have true love." Raphael looked at his daughter, this incredible girl who spoke with the wisdom of someone much older, and smiled. "You are absolutely right. Shall we get rid of this?" Together they tore the photo into small pieces and threw it in the trash. It was symbolic, a final closure to that painful chapter. The past no longer defined Raphael. He had chosen to move forward, to build something new, something true. On the drive back to London on Sunday afternoon, the three chatted animatedly about their plans for the following week. Isabella had a school presentation on human rights. Mariana was receiving a new batch of rescued dogs at the clinic. Raphael had an important meeting, but had already promised to leave early to have dinner with the family. Raphael drove slowly, in no hurry to arrive, savoring every moment with the two most important women in his life. The radio played softly. Mariana hummed along. Isabella laughed at something Thor had done in the back seat. It was a common, everyday scene, nothing extraordinary. But for Raphael, who had learned to value precisely these small things, it was everything. It was proof that sometimes life's most difficult moments can lead us to the most beautiful places. That tragedy can turn into a blessing, that a child knocking on a car window can change everything. When they finally arrived home, the sun was setting over London. They entered together, popcorn and Thor running ahead, excited to be back in familiar territory. The house welcomed them with that smell of home, that sense of belonging. Raphael paused for a moment at the entrance, watching Mariana take the bags to the bedroom, Isabella letting the dogs out in the yard, the family routine re-establishing itself, and he thought that if he could go back in time, if he could talk to that Raphael from 3 years ago stuck in traffic on Oxford Street, he would say, "Roll down the window. Listen to what that girl has to say. Because she's not just saving your money, she's saving your entire life." "Dad," Isabella called him from the yard. "Come see, there's a new bird's nest in the apple tree." Raphael smiled and went to her, Mariana joining them on the way. The three stood there in the garden where they had gotten married, watching the birds build their home. New life being born, always renewing, always starting over, just as they had done. And in that moment, Raphael knew with absolute certainty that he wouldn't change anything. Not the mistakes of the past, nor the pain he had suffered, nor the difficult lessons he had learned, because all of it had brought him here, to this family, to this love. to this life that, despite being born from the ashes of betrayal and despair, was now more beautiful and true than anything he could have planned. The story of Raphael, Mariana, and Isabella was not a perfect fairy tale. It was something better. It was real. It was hard-won, earned, built brick by brick upon the rubble of what could have been a tragedy. And that was precisely why it was so precious. Because in the end, the best stories are not those without problems. They are those where people choose every day to face problems together, where family is not defined by blood, but by the choice to stay, where love is not just a feeling, but a constant action of care and dedication. And as the three went back inside the house, preparing for another week of the everyday life they had built together, Raphael felt a deep peace. He was home, not just in the physical sense, but in the broader, more beautiful sense of the word. He had finally found his place in the world, alongside the right people, building something that no fortune could buy and no fraud could destroy. A true family, forged not by blind fate, but by the conscious choices of three people who decided to love and protect each other. And that, Raphael knew, was worth more than all the money in the world. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Raphael, Mariana, and Isabella has touched your hearts and shown that sometimes the greatest blessings come from the most unexpected moments. If this narrative has brought any meaning to you, we would like to invite you to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories we lovingly prepare. Every like and comment helps us continue bringing these narratives that celebrate the strength of love, family, and human resilience. Share in the comments if you have experienced a moment where a seemingly small event completely changed the course of your life. We look forward to reading your stories. And don't forget to hit the notification bell to be notified whenever we publish new content. Until the next story, and may your lives always be filled with true love and second chances.